Hello, my name is Daniel Blinn, and this is Consumer Law Group's webinar, How to Buy a New Car. Before I dive into the subject matter, let's talk a little bit about Consumer Law Group, the host and sponsor of this evening's program. We are auto dealer fraud attorneys. We serve consumers throughout Connecticut, and you can get a lot of useful information on how to buy a car and how to avoid getting ripped off by car dealerships at our blog. The games dealers play, you can access that at our website, www.consumerlawgroup.com. Also, once a week, we host office hours, which is a Google Plus Hangout where anybody can log in and ask any type of consumer law related question or anything else that might be on your mind. We do this once a week. This coming week, we're going to be on Friday at 3:30 p.m., but that does change from week to week. So if you're watching a recording of this webinar, check our website to find out when the next scheduled office hours may be. Now, we buy cars in this country in a way that's different than the way we buy just about anything else. Most things that you're going to buy, you can go into a store and you can pick out an item and be pretty assured that the price that you're going to pay for that item is the same price that anybody else is going to pay. And there's also an understanding that if you're going into an established business with most types of transactions, that you're going to be dealt with fairly and reasonably, and that while you may save some money if you go to store A instead of store B, that things are going to be within a range that's reasonable. That is not true with respect to buying cars. There is a tremendous variance in how much two different people are going to pay to get the exact same car. It's true with respect to used cars, and it's true with respect to new cars. Perhaps somewhat less true with respect to new cars, but there can still be a very dramatic difference. Perhaps some people may pay as much as a third or more higher than what someone else is going to pay. Now, the purpose of this program is not to tell people how to get the absolute best complete minimal deal that would be possible. Although, if you follow the advice that we're going to give you, you're going to be getting pretty close to that number. The primary thing is to give people information so that they can avoid the real colossal ripoffs and avoid falling into many of the pitfalls that, quite frankly, most people fall into when they go to a car dealership. Now, before we talk about what to do when you're in a dealership, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things that you should do before you actually go to a dealer. Some things that are going to be good to research. And the first thing that you should do is to research the financing. Now, some people are able to pay cash for a car, and that's terrific if you can, but they're a small minority. The vast majority of new car purchases made in the United States are financed. And there are some things that people ought to do before they go to a car dealership to make sure that things are good with their financing. Anytime before anyone's going to be making any type of major credit transaction, a mortgage or certainly a car purchase, they should take a look at their credit report to make sure that all of the information on the report is accurate. I give a site for a website, www.annualcreditreport.com. There are other places where you can get credit reports. We don't recommend them. This is the one that we suggest you go to because it's the one that is completely free. It's required of the consumer reporting agencies to provide all consumers with one free copy of the report every year. And this is the vehicle by which the consumer reporting agencies comply with that obligation. The other sites are commercial sites that are designed for a profit. They try to sell services, and a lot of times people give a credit card because they think it's free, lo and behold, a few months later, they start to see the money's coming out of their accounts. Annualcreditreport.com, make sure that everything is okay. If it's not okay, check out our website. You'll see we've got some good information on what to do to dispute inaccurate information. Now, you should also be checking around with respect to interest rates before you go to a car dealership. The dealership is going to want to finance your purchase. Before you have that conversation with anybody at a dealership, you should find out what types of financing is available. Check with your own bank and your own credit union to find out what kind of rates they're offering. Go online. I did that about an hour ago just to see what was available, and I saw that there are many, many places where you can get 3% for a 60-month new car loan. Some places are offering less than that. So it will really help you if you have some idea of what the prevailing rate is for new car loans before you start to shop. Now, we're going to talk about this some more, but there's a little bit of an issue when you're financing a car at a dealership, because they're not going to tell you this, but they may be getting approval of your credit application at a certain rate, but be permitted to mark that rate up, and the dealership profits by doing that. So, for example, you may apply for a car loan at a car dealership, and they may submit that credit application to a bank or a finance company. And they might say, yeah, we're going to approve this person at 3%. And the dealership comes back and says, good news, I was able to get you 5%. Well, what's that extra 2% about? Well, it is a markup that the dealership has added to the amount of, to the interest rate that was approved by the finance company. And that extra 1%, well, the finance company is probably going to get about half of it, and the car dealership is going to be keeping half of that as extra profit to the dealer. So you're much less likely to be agreeing to a high rate if you've done your homework and you've made a done some research as to what types of rates are available if you go elsewhere. And there are some advantages to financing at the dealership. What I do is I check out what rates are available to me elsewhere, and I'll go to the dealership and I'll say, this is what I can get someplace else. If you can match that rate, then I'll finance it through you. It's more convenient to finance at a dealership. And if you have problems down the line with the transaction where you might have to get involved in a lawsuit, you're going to find that you're frequently much better off if you finance the car at the dealership than you would be if you had financed it someplace else. One of the other things to look into is to find out whether or not there's any type of incentive financing going on. Incentive financing is something that is offered by finance companies that are owned by a manufacturer. For example, Toyota is an automobile manufacturer, and there is a subsidiary called Toyota Financial Services, and they are in business for purposes of providing financing to assist Toyota car dealerships in selling vehicles. And sometimes when they want to try to move some cars, they will offer incentive financing, sometimes 0% financing for up to 3 years, or below market rates. So one of the things you might want to look into when you're deciding what kind of car you want to buy is what types of incentive financing might be available. Now, after you've done some research on the financing, you also want to do some research on the car dealerships before you actually go to a dealership. I cannot tell you how many times I've sat across my conference room table from somebody who had just a horrible experience at a car dealership, and they'll say to me, you know, I called the Better Business Bureau. I made a complaint with the Better Business Bureau. And have you seen what the Better Business Bureau says this company's rating is? It's absolutely horrible. They didn't check the Better Business Bureau before they went to the car dealership. Better Business Bureau has good information. I'm not a huge fan of this company. with respect to, whether or not they're effective at resolving disputes. However, for somebody who's trying to find out whether or not a company has 100 complaints against it, it's a very good way to do that. But you have to check the website before you do the shopping. Other places that have information about dealerships are dealerrater.com and yelp.com. Google also has consumer rating information. All different types of social media you'll find where people can go online and register complaints. And before you go to a car dealership, I suggest that you check it out because it's a good way to avoid places where many, many people have had all kinds of problems. And one of the other things, of course, you want to do is you want to research the specific car that you want to buy. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Google is your friend. The internet is your friend. It's really easy now to get good information about what are good cars to buy. I do happen to be a fan of Consumer Reports, and every year their auto issue comes out in April. It's one of the reasons why we're doing this program now. I think that you're going to be seeing that issue hit the newsstands in another week or two. And they have good detailed ratings in there about motor vehicles. You can also go and find good tips on how to buy a car. I hope that this webinar is going to be useful, but I also suggest that you check out Consumer Reports as an excellent source of information and advice. One of the particular things that you should take a look at are the history of problems that cars have had. You can go back and you can see whether or not a particular model has been more reliable than average or less reliable than average in a broad range of categories. Car and Driver also has good information. That's a better source if you're really looking more for features and how a car drives, and if you're trying to get a sense of what it's going to be like to have a particular car, whether or not this car fits into your own unique style, Consumer Reports is really more a place to go to get a car that is less likely to have the transmission fail 3 years after you bought it. I suggest that people also do some research with the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration at safecar.gov. They have a rating system that rates the safety of motor vehicles. You know, I'm a parent, and that, of course, is going to be a concern to me. It's a concern to a lot of people. What you're looking for are vehicles that have 5 stars. There are many cars that have 4 stars. A lot of people think that that's going to be acceptable. Anything less than 4, I personally would not consider getting a particular motor vehicle. So it is true that smaller cars are less likely to have the 5-star rating system than some of the larger cars. But just a tip, check that out if you're interested in a specific car to get some information about it. Another tip that I give people, and I avoided making what could have been a really bad car purchase decision once by following this advice myself, is if you're thinking about buying a car and you're not really familiar with it, go ahead and rent it. I was interested in a vehicle that it was a new model that came out, and I thought it was a pretty neat car, and I was all set to buy one. And I also was about to take a vacation, and I needed to get a rental car. So I looked into it, and I found that I was able to rent this particular model. And I did. So I had a chance to live with this car for a week. And by the end of the week, I decided I hated that car. I didn't like it. I thought that the vision was horrible. And this is the type of thing that you might not notice if you're just doing a quick test drive. Sometimes you don't really learn about the quirks of a car or whether you're happy with it until after you've been driving it for a while. So I think it's a good idea before making that kind of investment to spend some time living with the car before you do it. So You've researched the financing, you've researched the car dealerships, and you figured out which ones are decent, and you've researched the cars, and you have an idea of what it is that you want to buy, and so forth. So let's take a look at the main thing that people look at when they first start to go to a dealership, and that is the new car sticker. It's called Monroney sticker, but dealerships seem to like to call it the Maroni for whatever reason. I guess Monroney is too hard for some to remember. The name comes from a senator from Oklahoma, and he's the person who wrote the bill that required that these stickers be placed on cars. Now, before the Monroney sticker, people could go into a dealership and the dealership could tell them anything. There was absolutely no guidance whatsoever on what a car was worth. And the idea on the Monroney sticker was to have the manufacturer have a suggested retail price for the car. And also to list on the car what equipment was standard and what equipment you're paying extra for. And that's one of the main things that the Monroney sticker does. It provides that information. Before this, a dealership could say, oh, well, this car has cruise control, and that's another $600, and that's the reason why this is more expensive. Well, with the Monroney sticker, you can go and check and see whether or not cruise control comes standard on the vehicle, and whether or not that really is something that's going to boost the price up. So it makes it much easier to make an apples-to-apples comparison when you're trying to pick between various cars on the same lot or different cars that different dealerships might have. I'm going to show you a Monroney sticker. Okay, there we go. And there are a few things here that I think are noteworthy that I'll like to point out to you. I'd like to see all right. Now, right over here, you'll see we've got the manufacturer and we've got the model number. Now, take a look. This is AWD. That stands for all-wheel drive. One of the very interesting things that I've seen come up multiple times are people bought cars and they really thought that the car that they were buying was an all-wheel drive vehicle, or they thought it was a front-wheel drive vehicle. And it turned out it wasn't what they expected. In many instances, people at a dealership did not tell them what it was they were getting, or they just assumed that because it's a SUV that they're purchasing in New England that it's going to be all-wheel drive. And that's something that you really need to check because you don't want to come home with a car and find out that something as significant as that is not what you were thinking. We've got standard equipment listed here, and it's listed mechanical safety and security, exterior and the interior, and these are all the things that are going to be standard on the vehicle. And you see what the standard vehicle price is, and then you get into the options. Now you notice here that these options are dealer installed options. That very frequently happens with many manufacturers where they have the dealership add some of these things, and you have a total, and then you have a total vehicle price. Now, one of the other things that's added to the price is going to be the destination charge, and all the vehicle manufacturers that are selling vehicles in this country have the same destination charge. The car could be made in Detroit, and you might be buying the car to Detroit dealership, whereas somebody else might be buying the car in Louisiana. It doesn't matter; they're both going to pay the same destination charge. And then you have the total vehicle price, and that is the if you're paying the sticker price, this is the amount that you're paying for the car. Now, Other information that you have is fuel economy and environment issues. It tells you what the expected miles per gallon is overall, the city mileage and the highway mileage, and you'll get a comparison as to what the costs are going to be based upon other vehicles that are in the same category. This is called the EPA box, by the way, to give you information about pollution and miles per gallon. You also find out where the car stands compared to other cars in this class of vehicles in terms of fuel economy as well as in terms of smog. If you're looking at getting an electric vehicle, a plug-in vehicle, the box looks completely different. This is what the standard vehicle looks like. The other thing in the Monroney sticker is we talked about that safecar.gov website before, and this shows what the various ratings are. They call it the 5-star ratings. That's because, as I think I mentioned, 5 is the highest it goes. And you'll see here that this gets the 5-star for the driver, but only the 4-star for the passenger. So if somebody's buying this car for themselves and they usually ride with a spouse, that says a lot. We probably don't want to go too deeply into that one. Rollover ratings is another thing that you need to pay particular attention to when you're dealing with an SUV. Most SUVs are going to have a 4-star rather than a 5-star because they have a much higher center of gravity and they are much more prone to tipping over than a sedan is, which is much closer to the ground. It'll tell you where the vehicle was assembled. It'll tell you the percentage of the parts that come from the USA if it's an American-made car. If it's made in Canada, it'll tell you the US-Canadian part contents. Indicate the country of origin for major components such as the engine and the transmission. So let me see if I can get back to the okay, there we go. And that is the Monroney sticker. Now we're about to get to the portion of the program where I think most people are most interested in, which is negotiating the price of the car. And that is a really important part of avoiding overpaying. But as you're going to see, it really isn't necessarily the biggest part. You almost always should never pay the sticker price for a car. And it's amazing that more people are not aware of that the sticker price is something that's put out there, and that most car dealerships are going to be willing to sell cars for substantially less than that. Now, there are exceptions. Sometimes you have a car that's in limited demand and that's very in limited supply with very high demand. When you have very limited supply and it just seems to be a hot vehicle, then chances are a dealership is not going to let that car go for less than sticker. Now, an interesting thing, and I see this a lot, is there are many people that will actually pay significantly more than the sticker price for a car. Now, there are two ways that this can happen. Sometimes dealerships will put another sticker on the window next to the Monroney sticker, and they'll put something on there where they'll add some dealer added options. Things like mud guards or floor mats or things like that have already been added to the car, pinstriping or various protectants and sealants and things like that. And sometimes they'll include on that sticker something called ADM, which stands for Additional Dealer Market or Additional Dealer Markup. And it's just an extra amount of money that they're adding to the car. They're using the initials because if they were upfront about what they're doing, people would look at the sticker and walk away. But most people really don't have a clue what this stuff is. And when a dealership does this, then they are acting in full compliance with the law by selling that car for more than the MSRP, because there is no requirement, at least in Connecticut, that a dealership sell a car at the manufacturer suggested retail price or less. They are allowed to sell it for more, but if they don't have that supplemental sticker on there showing additional dealer markup, and they're selling a car for more than, I think they're on thin ice, because at least in Connecticut there are regulations that say that it's an unfair trade practice for a car dealership to sell a car for more than the advertised price. And if they have information on their website showing the car and showing the MSRP, then I think most consumers are going to assume that that is their asking price for the vehicle. But what I've seen happen many times is somebody goes to a dealership and the sales personnel get a sense that we can really take advantage of this person, then you may see that price being marked up to something very significantly higher than that MSRP. So again, unless it's a really low supply, high demand vehicle, you should almost never pay sticker price. You should always pay something substantially less than that. Now, the advice that Consumer Reports and many other people give you is to find out what the dealer cost is, and then to go to the car dealerships and say, I know what your cost is. You paid $22,000 for this car. You give me your best price, and I'm going to go to 2 other dealerships, and I'm going to buy it to whoever gives me the lowest price. And that's a perfectly legitimate strategy to use to buy a car. It's not the one that I use when I buy a car. However, what I do is I do check that dealer cost. And I ask myself, what do I think is a fair profit for the car? And what the fair profit is, I think, depends at least in part on how expensive the car is and a variety of other factors. But if you're thinking something in the ballpark of $500, you're not thinking too far off. That's about right. Now, because these dealer costs are so easily available, and you can find them online at Add-ons.com and a number of other sources, the industry is adjusted, and what they do is they actually have a system of holdbacks where the price that the dealer pays for the car isn't really the price that the dealer pays for the car, because at the end of the year the manufacturer is going to be giving the dealership a payment based upon the total volume of cars that they sold. So it's sort of a way to kick some of that back to the dealership, because everybody knows that most consumers know that they can find out these manufacturer invoice prices. So there's not a true relationship between what you see for the manufacturer's invoice and what that car dealership really pays. And the amount of those holdbacks is not something that's widely accessible. There are, however, a couple of sources that you can go to get an idea of what an average or fair or typical price might be that people are paying for a car. And one of those is Edmunds.com. And Edmunds has what they call the true market value. And you can take any car and go to Edmunds, and you can enter the model that you want and the a color you want and the various add-ons and so forth. And it'll give you a little report that'll show you what the manufacturer's invoice is and what the MSRP is, and then it's going to have Edmunds' true market value, and you're going to find that number is what they say the average person is able to buy that car for. So if you're able to get the car for less than that, then you're doing better than average. And I've looked at some of those values, and I think that they're reasonably close to what somebody who does a fairly decent job is going to negotiate. Now, another source that you can go to is TrueCar.com, and what they purport to do is to actually get you the best deal from a dealership. And that that also is something that has some, I think, potential and something that's worth looking into. I have not used TrueCar.com. I've read a couple articles about it, and I do think it's something that's worthwhile to check out before buying a car. Another thing that you can do if you want to avoid hassles and you really don't want to get involved in negotiating, you don't want to deal with that type of stuff, is to buy a car through a buying club. There are all types of retail clubs that you can belong to. I think that Sam's Club and others like it have these types of services. I'm a member of USAA. It's an insurance company, and USAA does this for its members, where you tell them what you want to get, and they will negotiate with the dealership for you. And you'll get a price that, again, it's not going to be the absolute best price that your sharpest negotiator is going to be able to get on a good day, but it's going to be something that's not outrageously more than that. When I say not outrageously more, it might be just a few $100s more. And when you're thinking about buying a $20,000, $30,000 item, that's really not that much of a difference. So for people that want to avoid that hassle, that is a not a bad way to go. Now, one of the things you need to consider when buying a car, if you have another car that you're no longer going to be using, is whether or not you want to trade it into the car dealership. Now, you may have noticed I had on the previous slide a statement that you should try to keep the various parts of the deal separate. And what I'm really referring to when I say that is the trade-in. There are advantages to trading in a car to a car dealership. In Connecticut and in many other states, there's a tax advantage, and I'll explain what I mean by that. If you have a trade-in, and if that's worth $5,000 on trade, and if you're buying a $25,000 car, if you give that trade-in plus another $20,000, you are going to pay sales tax on $20,000. But if you were to take that same trade-in and sell it to somebody else, and you get $5,000, and then you add that to the other $20,000 that you had, and you pay the dealership the $25,000 for the new car, you're going to be paying sales tax on the full $25,000. So if you trade a car in, you are saving sales tax by not having to pay tax on the amount that was allowed to you on that new car. Now, if you have a loan on your old car, then the only tax savings are going to be on the equity that you have. So in the example I had before, if the car is worth $5,000 and you owe $2,000 on it, well, $2,000 of the $5,000 you're going to get for the car is going to be used to pay off that loan. It's only the $3,000 equity that you had that's going to generate any tax savings. But again, that's a substantial advantage. Another advantage is that you will, it's more convenient to trade a car into a dealership. You don't have to deal with running ads on Craigslist or in other places. You don't have strangers coming to your house. You don't have to worry whether or not somebody's going to take it out on a test drive and not bring it back. And the final thing is that if you have an outstanding loan on the car, it's a lot harder to sell it to a third party, because they're going to want to get the title, and they're not going to want to necessarily deal with the logistics of your paying off your car loan with the money that they give you, and then they're getting the title only after that loan gets paid off. I actually years ago did sell a used car that way, and it worked for me, but I'm not sure that everyone's going to be able to do that, or it's going to make sense. Now, of course, the biggest disadvantage to trading in a car at a dealership is they're not going to be giving you as much money for it as you're likely to get. What you need to do before you trade in a car is to check out kellybluebook.com or you can go to the library. They have the NADA, the National Automotive Dealers Association books, and to look up to get an idea of what your car is worth. Most people are going to have trouble getting the clean trade-in value as a trade-in. What a lot of folks do, CarMax will give you estimates, or actually they'll give you a cash offer for a car. So, before trading a car, and you might at least want to take it to CarMax, and they'll give you a cash offer. And at least that'll give you a starting point when you're negotiating with the dealership. And if you are taking that trade-in and you're going to be trying to sell it to a private party instead of trading it in, then a reasonable price is if you were to take a look at the NADA value and take a look at the trade-in and the retail value. Somewhere around the middle between those two prices is probably a reasonable price for a private sale. Now, after you buy the car, or you pick out the car, they're going to sit you down with a finance manager. And this is where a lot of people who think they're doing a really good job negotiating the price, where they get caught unaware and they get absolutely fleeced, because most of the profit in the new car sales is actually made on the back end by selling the extra products and things like that. Car dealers don't make all that much money in selling new cars based upon the profit, but they make it based upon all these other things. And I'm going to go down this list. VIN etching. This may not be as big an issue in other states as it is in Connecticut, but Connecticut allows car dealerships to pre-print on the purchase order forms a charge for taking the vehicle identification number and applying acid paper to the auto glass, the various windows, the various passenger and driver side, front and back, and the front windshield and the rear window, and to just etch the vehicle identification number on there. Now, there is some indication that when the auto glass has the vehicle identification number etched into it, that a vehicle is less attractive to thieves because it makes it harder to take the car and to remarket it or to chop it up or whatever. So there was a time when many insurance companies would give a discount if the VIN was etched on the glass. If before you even think about getting the VIN etched on there, you should check with your insurance company to see whether or not there will be any savings for you if you have that done. This is something that costs a car dealership maybe $3 or $4 in materials to do, and it takes them less than 5 minutes to do a car. They hire somebody that's making minimum wage or maybe a little bit more, and they'll do a whole lot of cars in about an hour. So this is not something that costs them a lot of money, but they're going to charge you $170, $180 to do this. So my advice is to skip the VIN etching. A lot of places are going to already put the VIN on the auto glass and they say it's already there. Sorry. Well, okay, that's good to know. Maybe this isn't the dealership that I want to shop in then. Another thing that car dealerships will try to push on you is a service contract. Now, when you're buying a new car, you're getting a manufacturer's warranty. And one of the things you should check out is what kind of warranty you're getting. The minimum that's offered by manufacturers selling cars in this country is 36 months, 36,000 miles. These service contracts will provide some coverage above and beyond that. They are, for the most part, a waste of money. There are very few people who get these add-on contracts that really get benefits from them. But let me give you a little bit of a quick disclaimer here. Sometimes people do get benefits, but in my opinion, the price that people pay for it is much too high given the protection that you may be getting. So my advice is to skip that altogether. Gap is another add-on that car dealerships will try to push on people. And I've seen this cost as much as $800 or $900. Sometimes it's only $300 or $400. And what Gap does is if a car is totaled in an accident, and if there's your insurance company is going to pay you what the retail value of that car is going to be. If you are underwater, which is if the amount of your loan exceeds the amount that the insurance company is going to pay out, Gap theoretically will wipe that out where you're not going to have to pay that difference. Now, I have seen instances where people had Gap and they did get a benefit because of that, and good for them, but the amount of money that people pay is obscenely high given the risk that they're trying to protect against. If you follow the advice in this webinar, you're not going to be underwater. Your insurance company is going to be taking care of virtually all of your loan unless you're putting zero down. And even if you're not putting zero down and there's a tiny little bit, does it really make sense to pay $700 or $800 to protect yourself against a tiny, tiny, tiny risk of a $2,000 loss? And I would submit that it doesn't. If you take a look at our Game Stealer Play blogs, you'll see that we just recently did an article about Gap and the reasons why we think that it's a bad deal. Credit life, credit disability is something we don't see very much anymore. They stopped pushing this stuff because it was registered as an insurance product, and as a result, regulators did limit the amount that they're able to gouge consumers on it. But occasionally you do still see it. And again, this does provide benefits to people, but the price, this is the most profitable insurance product that's on the market. It's so bad that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac disallowed it on any mortgages that they were underwriting, and they made the mortgage community stop. So you hardly ever see this stuff in mortgage financing anymore, but you still do see it sometimes in cars. And again, I recommend that you avoid it. We talked before about the markup on the financing, and the best way to protect yourself against that is to do your homework before you go to the car dealership and to find out how much they are charging for, what are the market rates for interest, to make sure that you're not paying too much more than that. Service planes should read service plans, and forgive that typo, please. One of the things that car dealerships will sometimes try to rope people into is, will they pay a certain amount of money and they'll take care of the servicing. It'll cover the oil changes, it'll cover tire rotations and things like that. If you do a comparison of the cost of the service that's covered by the plan and what you typically pay for these plans, you will see that these plans are grossly overpriced. Number one, you're limiting yourself in flexibility-wise. You're forcing yourself to go to the dealership to do this stuff. Number two, what if you don't have this car 2 or 3 years from now? You've paid for service that you're never going to wind up using. A lot of times this is just stuff that they are adding to the contract. Because they know that a lot of people just aren't going to read the contract closely, and they're not going to know that it's there. They try to get people to focus on what their monthly payment is going to be rather than the individual things that go into that monthly payment. And once they get people focused on that, then it becomes very, very easy to slide all kinds of stuff in there without their knowing it. The same is true with tire protection and road protection. A lot of people get these road protection plans at a car dealership, and they're completely unaware that they have it. Many of them already have AAA membership, and they're unaware that they're paying for duplicate protection from different companies. I've seen some people pay for this type of protection when they bought a high-end car, one of the luxury or near luxury brands that includes that type of protection plan from the manufacturer. So I not too long ago, I sat down with somebody and they had AAA, they had a road protection plan from the car dealership, and they also had it from the manufacturer. So they were paying 3 times for the same service. Now a really big one is the dealer conveyance fee. Connecticut has some of the highest dealer conveyance fees in the country. The most expensive one I've seen is $700, and this is a price that the dealership charges you just to process the paperwork and to close out the sale. Now, if you're paying cash for the car and you're not financing it, you can avoid this fee altogether by telling the dealership, I'll go to DMV myself. I'll give you the money, you give me the paperwork, I'll run it over to DMV, and I'll take care of getting the car registered. I don't need you to do it for me. And for $700, I think it's worthwhile spending a few hours of your time to do that. If you are financing the car at the dealership, however, you are going to have to allow the dealership to process the paperwork. And my advice is to find out what the dealer conveyance fee is before you negotiate your cash price for the car. And when you're figuring out how much profit is reasonable and so forth, include the dealer conveyance fee as part of that. Dealerships are supposed to have signs up that say what the dealer conveyance fee is. Some of them have them, others don't. The amount is prominently featured on the purchase orders, but very important to know what it is that you're going to pay before you close that out. This is something that car dealerships are very good at. They try to wear people down because they know that if once they wear you down, that you're going to be making decisions that you otherwise would not make. So keep yourself fresh. It's a good idea to go with somebody else. If you have a friend that you can bring with you who's going to be disinterested in the transaction, then you know they might be able to help you keep some perspective and avoid this problem of getting weary and doing something that you don't really want to do. And you should never be afraid to walk out, just to take a break, and just to think about what's happening, you know, you're really not in a fair fight when you're at a car dealership because these people are very, very skilled at knowing what buttons to push to make people pay things. And it's their job to get you to pay as much as they can. And it's a consumer's job to pay as little as possible. And the problem is a lot of times the consumer doesn't know that that's how the game is played. And the other problem, of course, is the car dealership does this every day and they're very skilled at it. And it's something that most consumers just don't do very often. So they're really at a tremendous disadvantage. One of the important things that you need to do is to make sure that you understand your contract. Many times people will go ahead and sign because they just assume that the deal that's been described to them is the same deal that's on the contract. You got to look at it line by line by line and make sure you understand every item on it. Make sure that you understand every charge that's on it. If a dealership is telling you that you have to get the service contract or you have to get the gap in order to get approved for financing or in order to get a certain rate, ask them to put that in writing and watch what happens. I can almost guarantee you that they will refuse to put that in writing. And the reason why is because they're going to deny down the road that they ever said it because it's not true. So don't buy what you don't need and don't sign something that you have not read and you have not completely understood it. Now, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about purchasing versus leasing. And the bottom line is that in the vast majority of circumstances, I think that leasing is a terrible mistake, and it's something that people should almost never do. Main reason why, when you purchase, you're going to be saving money. Studies that have looked at purchase deals versus leasing deals of people who have the automobile purchasing habits of somebody who might consider a lease, that would be somebody who gets a new car every 3 years, that they will save money most of the time by buying the car and then trading it in at the end of that 3-year period than they will as opposed to leasing a car and turning that car in at the end of a typical 3-year lease. Another reason why purchasing is a better deal most of the time is you have much more flexibility. If you lease a car and then something happens and you can't keep it for the full length of the lease, it's much, much more expensive to get out of a lease than it is to sell a car that you just bought a short time ago. And I've talked to people who have had to get rid of cars that they leased for all different kinds of reasons. One person got a new job, and the job came with a car. Somebody else took a new job, and they were going to be going overseas, and they couldn't take the car with them. Someone else had a car with the standard transmission, and they wound up having a terrible fracture with their left leg, and they couldn't work a clutch anymore. And in each of these cases, if they had purchased the vehicle instead of leased it, they would have had a much, much easier time just selling the car and using the proceeds to pay off the loan. Then, it's much cheaper to do that than it is to try to get out of a lease. Another reason why I prefer purchasing over leasing for most people is that the purchase contracts are much, much easier to understand. I've talked to lawyers who really don't understand well the way that the leases work, and I don't have time this evening to get into that, but they're very complicated. Another reason is with the lease, you're going to be limited in the number of miles that you can drive. If you go way under miles, then you paid for a lot of miles you're not going to use. If you go way over miles, it's going to be expensive because you're going to have to pay probably 15, 20, 25 cents a mile for each mile you go over. With a lease, if the car has a few scratches on it, well, you're not going to get quite as much in trade-in, but the amount that you're going to be losing at that is a lot less than the amount that the leasing company is going to hit you with when you turn in the car with some scratches at the end of the lease. So those are all the advantages to purchasing over leasing. The primary advantage to leasing is you can get a vehicle with a lower monthly payment. Of course, at the end of the lease, you're not going to own the car. You're going to have to turn it in. The reason why the payments are lower is that you're not really paying anything towards pay down of the loan balance, but instead you're paying the equivalent of interest and you're paying for the depreciation of the car, and that's less than paying for the full cost of the car. The other advantages of a lease is that maybe you're going to get a car that is, for example, if you're thinking of getting one of the new electric cars, it might be easier to get rid of it at the end if the car winds up having problems. There are still a lot of questions about some of the more high-tech vehicles, about what's going to be happening with them and whether they're going to be battery problems down the road, and you might just be happier to have a vehicle that's easier to unload. In a few cases, it might be cheaper if you're going to be turning the car over every 3 years. Again, leasing is something you might want to consider, but it's not something I would recommend. Some final tips for you. Make sure that any promises you get at a car dealership are put into writing. I cannot tell you how many times people have come in here and they've told me about promises that the dealership gave them that I know they never had any intention of keeping. And if you insist that a dealership put the promise in writing before you do a deal, you'll be able to find out right away if they're serious, because if they refuse, it means they're not. And you'll be able to enforce the promise down the road if you do get it in writing. If you are trading a car in and your registration is about to expire, tell the dealership you'll take new plates. Unless you're really fond of the license plate number that you have, you can save a lot of money, because if you do a transfer, your registration is going to expire at the same time that your old registration was going to expire. So you can spend a lot more money by doing a transfer. If you have only about 9 months or less remaining on your current registration. Make sure you get copies of all papers that you sign. And you should ask as you're going through, every time you're signing something, am I going to get a copy of that one? Where's my copy of that? There are some documents that a car dealer is going to have you sign that they're just going to keep for themselves. They're not going to give to you. Obviously, you should be reading the documents over before you sign them. Don't worry about how annoyed the finance manager gets if you're taking the time to do that. He's doing that because he doesn't want you to know what's in it. So don't let yourself be bullied into rushing through the paperwork. And confirm the mileage disclosures and check the odometer. We've seen many cases where people bought cars that were sold as new, but they had very significant mileage on them. Be sure to check out, make sure you're looking at the difference between the trip meter versus the odometer. A lot of people get fooled by that, where they might only be 20 miles on the trip meter, but then the odometer has 700 miles on it. If the car you're buying is really a demonstrator and not truly a new car, maybe you can get a good discount on it, but bear in mind you don't know what kind of history that vehicle has had. So at this point, I'm going to open it up to any questions that anybody may have. You can either type it on the in the chat box, or if somebody wants to speak, I'm going to unmute the call now. Okay, no questions? I'll wait for just another minute. Okay, well, I thank everybody for logging in, and this concludes our webinar. Have a good evening, everybody.